Is the Bitcoin bull market over? Bitcoin recently broke below 90K and we're currently trading in the lower 80s. This has got a lot of people scared that maybe Bitcoin is entering a bear market. Maybe we could be heading a lot lower. But to be honest with you, I don't think that's going to happen. I still think that Bitcoin has a lot of upside, and I think we are still right in the thick of this bull run. In this video, I'm going to tell you why. We're going to go over some of the bullish catalysts that I see for Bitcoin. We're also going to talk about the macro because, as we know, the value and price of the dollar has a lot to do with the value and price of Bitcoin. And we are seeing some interesting macro trends right now. So we're going to get into all of that. Before we do, please make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the YouTube. Really appreciate your support. I'm also going to put a QR code down below for a Bitcoin tip. If you want to support the channel, feel free to leave me a little tip. Now let's get into it. As I mentioned, Bitcoin broke below 90K, and now the question is, where is it heading next? It's very difficult to know where Bitcoin is going to go in the short term, but we know that we were kind of trading between that 90K to 109, 110K level for a while. Now that we've clearly broken below that 90K level, I wouldn't be surprised if we head down to 80K. We're almost there right now. I believe right now we're around 83K. And I wouldn't be surprised if we headed down to that 75K level. It took us a while to really break above 74K, 75K. And we saw that happen on election night. It took the victory of Donald Trump to push us up into that new territory. And sometimes what needs to happen is we need to go back and test that level, that barrier that was so difficult for us to cross back around the time of the election before we can head higher. So I wouldn't be surprised if we head back down to 75K before we can really break out higher. But anytime we have dips like this, you're going to have a lot of people looking to buy in, looking to get exposure. People who saw Bitcoin go up to 100K and thought, man, I really missed this opportunity. And now that the price is lower, they're buying in. So we will see if we break below 80K. I've been listening to some people who believe that we will. But you never know. You could see some big players come in now in the low 80s and buy up some of that Bitcoin. Anytime we do get dips like this, it's a great opportunity to accumulate more Bitcoin. So if you are interested in Bitcoin, now is a great opportunity. Obviously, do your own research, but man, what a discount, what a deal to see Bitcoin in the lower 80s right now with all the bullish news that we've seen over the past year or so. Now, if there's been all this bullish news, then why is Bitcoin breaking lower? Shouldn't Bitcoin be breaking higher? I think that what we are seeing is we saw all this bullish enthusiasm and momentum for Bitcoin after the election. And one chart that really shows this is the Bitcoin balance on exchanges chart, which we're going to take a look at now. And as you can see, around November 5th, when we had the election, we saw Bitcoin flying off exchanges. Everyone was eating up Bitcoin. And we saw that momentum, that hype really last for a couple of months into January. But now that we're in late February, you can see in this chart that people have stopped taking Bitcoin off exchanges, and we're actually seeing Bitcoin start to enter exchanges, which is not something that we want to see. If you're a Bitcoin holder, you want to see people eating up the supply. If people are selling, that's not a great sign. And to me, that really just signifies that this election rally is kind of over, and we're waiting on that next big catalyst to send us higher. We knew that Trump was a pro-Bitcoin candidate. He has a lot of pro-Bitcoin people in his administration. We had all this strategic Bitcoin reserve talk, and we really haven't seen a strategic Bitcoin reserve formed. So maybe people are kind of a little afraid that this administration may not go through with that plan. I still do think it will happen, but maybe people are just noticing that it hasn't happened yet and they're starting to take their chips off the table a little bit. But that brings us to our next point. Let's talk about one of the biggest, if not the biggest, bullish catalyst for Bitcoin, and that is nation state game theory. With the US turning pro Bitcoin and pro crypto and putting the world on notice, I think we are going to start to see some nation states stacking Bitcoin. We know that El Salvador started the trend a couple of years ago, and we actually just got news that Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund bought $437 million worth of the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. And the more we see nation states buying into Bitcoin, they may not all announce it, but the more we see these large players buying in, the more incentivized other nation states are going to be to buy Bitcoin, because you have to hedge against its success. If the whole world buys Bitcoin, all these nations around the world buy Bitcoin, and you're a nation and you don't buy it, well, that could put you in a tough position. So I think that we are going to see nation state game theory really unfold over the next couple of years here. And as these large players buy up big amounts of Bitcoin, we are going to see the supply running out. If a couple of large countries come in and say, hey, we're going to buy 100,000 Bitcoin to get ahead of this thing because clearly Bitcoin is not going away, then that could push up the price, and we could see other nations forced to get involved and buy in as well. And in that type of scenario, we could see things move pretty quickly. We could see big moves that a lot of people would not expect. There's only a little over 2 million Bitcoin on exchanges currently. And when you think about the amount of money that these large countries have, they could really move the Bitcoin price a lot higher with a small purchase, considering the total amount of money and capital that they have to use. We can also look at business level adoption. Ever since Trump won the election, we have seen a lot of businesses come out and say, hey, we are starting to stack Bitcoin. And anytime a company comes out and announces that they are stacking Bitcoin, what do we see happen with their share price? It shoots up. It shoots up a lot higher, and this is clearly a great strategy for a company. If you announce that you are buying Bitcoin, then there's a high likelihood that you're going to see your share price head higher. You are going to see the value of your company head higher. And as a company, you should want to hold the best monetary asset out there. So I think we are going to see this trend continue. We just saw some news on X that GameStop could potentially be putting some of their cash into Bitcoin. I think they have around 4 billion in cash. So GameStop isn't a huge company, but interesting to see how they just continue to linger around. And I think that would be a smart move for a company that probably doesn't have a lot to offer, but if they have Bitcoin, I'm sure that they can survive for a long time. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of companies do this because it's just an easy winning strategy. Another bullish catalyst that we got was the repeal of SAB 121. Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 made it difficult for the banking system to offer crypto and Bitcoin custody services, and it really just made it difficult for them to deal with Bitcoin at all. But now that SAB 121 has been repealed, we are going to see Bitcoin and unfortunately crypto integrated with the banking system. These are the largest financial institutions in the world, and once they start offering crypto and Bitcoin custody services and we start seeing Bitcoin-backed loans, this is going to bring in a lot more people to Bitcoin, and it's going to bring in a lot more money to Bitcoin. A lot of people haven't felt comfortable with Bitcoin because it's this kind of underground thing. It's this digital money that a lot of people don't really understand. And really, when a lot of people have gone to their financial advisors or their bank to ask about Bitcoin in the past, those financial advisors and those banks have told them to stay away. For a long time, the traditional financial institutions were Bitcoin haters. They didn't want to see people invest in Bitcoin because it's an alternative to the traditional financial system and its competition. But the traditional financial institutions have started to realize that they can't stop this train. They can't stop Bitcoin. So what do you do when you can't beat something, you join it. And now all these banks are going to be flipping their stance. A lot of them already have, and they are going to be offering Bitcoin services like Bitcoin custody and Bitcoin backed loans. And we'll probably see a lot of these financial institutions and advisors recommending it to their customers, their clients, that they should have some exposure to this asset. So it's a huge flip from all these traditional financial institutions kind of shunning Bitcoin to really accepting it and integrating it with the traditional financial system. Now, I think that Bitcoin will probably end up replacing a lot of banks because you can just custody Bitcoin yourself. And I really don't think it's smart to custody Bitcoin with a bank, but it's a huge sign of acceptance for Bitcoin that all these traditional financial institutions are opening their doors to this asset. And with that, we're going to see a lot of people, ironically, become more comfortable with Bitcoin. Before we get into the macro, I want to briefly mention where we are in the halving cycle. We had the last halving in April of 2024, and it's been about 10 months since the halving. Typically, we see Bitcoin go on its big rally 6 to 18 months following the halving. So I'm a little bit surprised that we are not higher, but I'm expecting Bitcoin to go a lot higher this year. And when you consider that we're only seeing 450 Bitcoin enter the circulating supply every day, and the fact that we're seeing typically a lot more of that eaten up every day, I think that Bitcoin is really set to shoot up a lot higher over the next couple of years. When you really try to simplify Bitcoin, it is just supply and demand. We know the supply, so we just have to monitor the demand, and we are seeing a ton of demand. Yes, we see kind of these areas where we're seeing high demand, and then we have areas where people are selling, but overall, I think that we are going to see people eating up more than 450 Bitcoin a day moving forward, and that is going to lead to the price going higher. It's going to lead to the supply running out. Now let's talk macro. Leading up to the election, there was a lot of positive sentiment because a lot of people were anticipating that Trump was going to win and he's going to be better for the markets. And we saw that sentiment last for a while, but now we're sitting in February. Trump has come up with this idea for aggressive tariffs. We're seeing this Doge team really crack down and cutting a lot of jobs. And there is a lot of fear that the economy may be heading into a bad place in the short term. With these tariffs, there's fears that it is going to lead to higher prices and it's going to hurt businesses. It's going to hurt consumer demand, and same with what Doge is doing. You also look at the fact that we are still at a somewhat high federal funds rate. We're between 4.25% and 4.5%. And we haven't really seen the Fed shift from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing. Let's go ahead and take a look at a visual here, which shows the Fed balance sheet. And as you can see, since around 2022, the Fed has been selling assets into the system, right? They've been selling treasuries, pushing treasuries into the system, and they've been taking money out of the system. And when that happens, we see liquidity kind of dry up. And with a system that is dependent upon debt and where everyone is continuously borrowing more and more, you can't have liquidity coming out of the system too much. And I think that at some point this year, we are really going to see the Fed shift from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing. So rather than selling these treasuries and assets into the system, they're going to be buying those assets out of the system and pushing money into the system. And that is what we call quantitative easing, which is effectively money printing, right? They are creating new monetary units and they're pushing it into the economy, into the system. With more money being pushed into the system, it helps support all that credit that is out there, and it helps ensure that all this debt won't collapse. So really, the government and the Fed are walking a tight line right now. They don't want to push too much liquidity and money out there because that's going to lead to more inflation. And we know that inflation is sticky and it's not going away. But they also don't want to keep their policy too tight, because that will lead to debt collapsing. And when debt starts collapsing, that means that the Fed and the government, they have to come in and push a bunch of liquidity into the system. And that will lead to even worse inflation. So they're in a tough position. I checked on Polymarket and it looks like we are probably not going to see a rate cut in March. So maybe the markets are realizing that the next 6 months or so could be tough with these tighter financial conditions, with the tariffs, with these government layoffs, and we're seeing people shifting out of risk assets because of that. And we know that Bitcoin is still kind of treated like a risk asset. So I definitely think that the current macro picture with all this fear and uncertainty out there is affecting Bitcoin. And that's part of the reason why we dipped below 90K. I want to end this video by talking about the Bitcoin cycles a little bit. Historically, Bitcoin has kind of gone through these boom and bust patterns where we see the Bitcoin price shoot up a lot higher, 10x, 20x, following the halving. And then we see Bitcoin fall down like 75%. But I actually think that this cyclical pattern is going to end. And the more we go through these halvings, the less significant they become. So at the last halving, we went from a 6.25 Bitcoin block reward to a 3.125 Bitcoin block reward. And at the next halving, we will go down to around a 1.5-ish block reward. So we're seeing that with these halvings, they are becoming less and less significant. And we've also seen Bitcoin climb to a market cap of near $2 trillion. We've seen Bitcoin adoption grow a lot. And I think people are starting to get the picture that something bigger is happening here. A lot of people look at Bitcoin as a vehicle to acquire more dollars. They think, hey, if I buy Bitcoin today at 85K and it goes up to $1 million, then I can sell the Bitcoin and have $1 million. But I think this mindset is going to change. Yes, when Bitcoin goes higher, we are going to see people sell Bitcoin because they want to buy nice things. Maybe somebody wants to buy a house or a car or something else. But let's say Bitcoin does go up to $1 million and you sell it. Well, then you just have $1 million and those dollars are just depreciating. So I think the more Bitcoin goes up and the more people see that Bitcoin's going to keep going up, they're just going to want to keep their money in Bitcoin. Think about all the people who bought into Bitcoin early when it was under $10, and once it went to $500, they sold it thinking they were a genius. Well, imagine if they had continued to hold it through these cycles, and now they had that Bitcoin at a price of around $85,000. They'd be a whole lot richer. The more Bitcoin goes up, the more people start to realize that they don't want dollars. They want Bitcoin, the better money. And really the only reason that people need dollars is because that's what we're currently using as a medium of exchange. There aren't that many places that are really accepting Bitcoin yet. And really the rails for using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange haven't been built out that widely yet. And this is something that could take some time. But once those rails are built and you're able to just go to the grocery store and buy your groceries in Bitcoin, then why do you need the dollar at all, right? And as a merchant, wouldn't you rather accept Bitcoin, the money that's going up, rather than the dollar, the money that is depreciating? So I think we are just going to see the mindset of people really shift over the next couple of years when it comes to Bitcoin. And people are just going to realize that I don't want to sell my Bitcoin for dollars at all. I don't care how high it goes in dollars, because what is happening is Bitcoin is replacing the dollar. So why would I want more dollars at all? So at some point here, I think we'll see the Bitcoin cycles end. I'm not sure if we have one more to go before that happens, but I just don't see the incentive for people to sell back into dollars. And I think that people are kind of realizing that something bad is happening with the dollar, and that, maybe there's a big problem with our existing form of money. That is going to wrap it up for this video. To kind of re-answer the question, is the bull market over? I don't think it is. I think we are headed a lot higher. So looking at this recent dipping down below 90K, I think this is a great buying opportunity. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.